the Word of God with us, and we are concluding our series on extravagant generosity that we've been going through these weeks in October. And we're concluding with our Commitment Sunday and Celebration Sunday. And the extravagant generosity team has planned for us to go through this emphasis in a special way. And so today we are concluding our series of messages with living the good life. You know, nobody says, give me the mediocre life. Nobody says, give me the lousy life. Everyone wants to experience the good life. Give me the good life. In fact, I heard that phrase a lot this past week with all these record jackpots in our lottery. Some of you have said it. I won't call out names. But if I hit the jackpot, I will live the good life. I'll live a really, really good life. Some of you said. Going back to the ancient Greeks, philosophers have argued that good life should be our aim. Hedonism was a philosophical school that articulated this view. Hedonists believe the chief purpose of human life is to experience as much pleasure as possible and to minimize pain. Today it is widely accepted in our culture and society that pleasure is a path to the good life. That's what some of you were articulating when you were talking about the lottery even. You articulate that it's going to be a pleasurable life. To be able to do things you've been dreaming about. The good life. That pleasure is a path to the good life. There's also embedded in that is a common assumption if you accumulate material possessions. If you have enough wealth, if you can save enough for retirement, if your retirement continues to, continue to increase, you'll experience a good life that everyone wants. Well, my wife Nancy makes delicious chocolate chip cookies and so many other great baked desserts. And so chocolate chip cookies, I love eating them when they're warm, don't you? Just out of the oven. And so the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, they're delicious. But the more I eat, I notice when I get to the fourth one, and the fifth one, and the sixth one, the seventh one, and the eighth one, and the ninth one, the more I eat a dozen warm chocolate chip cookies, rather than feeling satisfied, I kind of feel sick to my stomach. I know some of you have been there with me. But in the same way, a focus on the acquisition of more money, more and more and more possessions does not lead to satisfaction. Sometimes it can leave us feeling sick. The writer of the book Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, which we studied recently in our Disciple Bible study, the writer identified himself as a teacher. As he looked back on his life, the teacher explained that he tried to fill his life with every pleasurable experience imagined. And only afterward did he realize it was all meaningless. He had been chasing after the wind. It seems like a lot of people continue to miss this lesson. I read about a recent study involving 120 people who on average earn $25 million a year. These multimillionaires were asked questions about such things as whether they thought they had enough, if they felt secure, if they were experiencing the good life based on their standard of living. These 120 people earn $25 million average a year. You know what their answer was? No. Next, the millionaires were asked how much more income would you need to have in order to feel like you were secure. The average answer was that if they could have just 25% more, Which works out, some of you who know math have already figured it out, 25% more means they $6.25 million more a year. Then they will feel secure and satisfied. For those of us who don't have annual incomes in the millions, the answer seems absurd. We would enjoy the challenge of trying just to live on that $25 million a year. Would you like that challenge? But it shows at every level we're chasing after the wind. As we look in the past 50 years in the United States, we see what has happened when people have tried different paths to the good life. American standard of living has gone up dramatically. The average new home 50 years ago was 1/3 the size of average new homes today. Some of you remember the home you may have been living 50 years ago, for those of you who are over 50? Remember those homes? And how homes have increased. Clearly, having more wealth and more possessions haven't led to more satisfaction. In fact, the United Nations has issued a study since 2012 every year called the World Happiness Report. They surveyed thousands of people in 50 different countries, trying to find out how happy people are in those countries and what factors make them happy. In the very first report, the United States ranked 23rd out of those top 50 countries. In terms of overall happiness, the people in the wealthiest nation in the world rank behind a number of less prosperous nations, including Malaysia, Tanzania, Andorra, Thailand, Vietnam, El Salvador, Indonesia. In recent years, the United States has moved up in happiness ranking, but we're still nowhere near the top. What is the good life? What does it mean to be happy and content, as we talked about last week? And an article written by a very successful entrepreneur leaves these type of words. She said, at the height of my success, I was actually pretty miserable. I'm not saying there's an inverse relationship between success and happiness, just that there's not necessarily a positive one. They are two very different things, happiness and success. Achieving success is not the same as achieving happiness or experiencing the good life. There's a story about a group of mountain climbers several years ago. They spent years preparing for the adventure. On the way up, they encountered the kind of terrible sudden snowstorm that is common on the world's greatest mountain ranges. The remaining members pushed on to the peak. Some of the members died during their climb. When they made it to the summit, the leader of the expedition stood at the peak looking around. And all he could think of was the cost of the expedition, how many years it took, how much time, how much money, the lives that were lost. And standing there at the peak, he asked himself, is this all? Is this really all there is? So where do we turn after we realize success is not the same as happiness? Maybe we would need to redefine what the good life means. So our ultimate example, of course, is Jesus. An ultimate example of what the good life is Jesus. No doubt for us. On the night before he died, Jesus shocked his disciples by washing their feet, which is one of the most humblest tasks anyone could ever perform in his day. And even today. It was a dramatic illustration of his teaching. Whoever wants to be first must be first of all and servant of all. And then the next day, in his greatest act of love, Jesus laid down his life to redeem the human race. So here's what Jesus taught us. In fact, here is what all of the Bible The life that God wants for us, the good life, is lived in relationship to God and to other people. Micah asks what the Lord requires of us, and Micah provides the answer: to do justice, to love kindness. And that could be a whole series of itself on kindness, especially in today. And to walk humbly with your God. People kept asking Jesus about the good life. In today's scripture, a lawyer desired to put Jesus to the test about the greatest commandment. And so instead of the greatest commandment, Jesus gave two. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And then the second one is this: you shall love the neighbor as yourself. And everything else fits in those two commandments. Jesus was teaching us that good life is found in our love for God and our relationship with others. Love God and love others. Eugene Peterson, which I mentioned in our prayer concerns, who died this week. I thought we would see again that scripture we read from the Message. Just see that on the screen. Because sometimes I love the way that Eugene Peterson gives these same type of words in his paraphrase. One of their religion scholars spoke for them, posing a question they hoped would show him up, show Jesus up. Teacher, which command in God's law is the most important? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your passion. Everything you're passionate about. In your prayer, in your intelligence. This is the most important, the first on any list. But there's a second set alongside it. Love others as well as you love yourself. These two commandments are pegs. I like that image, pegs. You have pegs in your house, maybe when you hang up coats or hang up your keys or hang up something. These commands are pegs. And everything in God's law and the prophets hangs from them. So everything in Scripture hangs on those two pegs. The Gospels has a whole lot of one another's. Love one another, serve one another, bless one another, forgive one another, do unto one another. And that tells us how the Christian life is lived. They show us that the good life is found in how we treat one another. We experience happiness, joy. There's that word joy and fulfillment. When we live a good life towards God and towards others. We receive joy in the giving of ourselves. When I plan for a funeral or a memorial service, I usually sit down with the family and ask, tell me about your loved ones. Tell me about your loved one. And even if I knew that person well, there's always so much I do not know. And sometimes it's kind of a special time for other family members to share, because sometimes they learn things about their loved one they didn't really know or they forgot. And I usually ask, what does your loved one, how do they want to be remembered? So when someone sits down with our family, what will the answers be to those questions? What would we want to be remembered for? What are our defining characteristics? You know, someday I would hope that you and I will be remembered for generosity. I hope that people would say of us, he was defined by generosity, or she lived what Jesus taught. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And my hope is that we learn the truth of the old saying that have been attributed to Winston Churchill. We make a living by what we give, but we make a life by what we give. What success looks like? It doesn't have to do with how much money we make. how much pleasure you can cram into your life, or what level of achievement that you have obtained in your work or post-work or retirement. It has everything to do with how you love the people placed in your path. How you make the world a better place by investing in God things, investing in other human beings. And how you trusted in God's unfailing love for you through Jesus Christ. And who died for you and died for one another. So that we can love God and love others. When you do those things, nobody has to tell you how to find a good life. You'll know for yourself that you are living. We love because God first loved us, is what we read in the Scripture. And we can even paraphrase it, as G. Peterson paraphrased other Scriptures. We can paraphrase, we love because God first loved us. But as we think about commitments today, we can say we give because God first gave to us. Extravagant generosity of a God who so loved us and so loved the world that he gave Jesus Christ. Let us pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks for life. And we give you thanks for good life that you have given us the gift. Help us to claim the good life for ourselves and realize that good life comes from loving you, O God, and loving others. Help us to live that out with our lives, our words, our actions, our thoughts, and our gifts. And help us pass that on to our world who need to hear it and who needs to see it in us. Help us, God, live a good life.